Welcome to the Writer Dojo with your host, Steve Diamond
Happy New Year.
and Correia.
Happy New Year's!
Today's episode, wrapping it up.
Welcome back to the Writer Dojo, everybody. This episode, as you know, this is our last episode of 2022. So, and New Year's is like a few days away. So Happy New Year to all of you Writer Dojo listeners out there. Thank you so much for sticking with us this whole year. If you're one of our original listeners, I don't know. Bless you for dealing with our craziness for a year and a half. If you're one of our new listeners, hey, welcome aboard. You've got so many episodes to listen to and re-listen to, and tons more episodes to come. I know we said this at the start of season 3, but start of season 4, which will come next week or the week after, we might take a 1 or 2 week break to start the year, just so that we have sanity for a minute. But we are going to have more guests on, whether in person or call in. We've been testing some of that stuff out. We're looking at equipment we can buy for it. And the money that we're using to buy the equipment is literally thank you to our supporters. That money that you have contributed by being supporters, we are using directly to buy equipment, whether for recording at home or, as Larry and I were talking a couple weeks ago, for taking our show on the road when we go to conventions together. So microphones and sound mixers and stuff like that, or mixing boards. I don't know what the frick they're called. We'll ask Craig.
We have smart people to help us.
This is why Craig and Jack help us with things, because we just talk. So, Larry, it's the end of the year, which means we need to talk about
Endings.
the end.
Yay!
A few weeks ago, we were talking about writing sequels, and one of the things that we came up with in the course of that really that episode was almost an hour long.
That was one of our longest episodes.
And I think the reception to it was really good. People really seemed to like the episode. I enjoyed that episode a lot.
It was fun.
And I think that next year, as we're going through episodes, we'll talk about, we'll kind of take you on the journey with us as we go through some of our brainstorming, like how it went when we brainstormed for the sequel to Servants of War. And then we'll just periodically update you episode here, episode there, about our whole process as we go through it, just for fun.
I think it's a great idea.
Because if you haven't figured it out by now, Larry and I are extremely transparent about our processes and how we do things, from coming up with ideas to titles, as we've talked about, to names of characters, as we've talked about, tenses, all these things.
Yeah, we don't hide behind the mystical muses.
Yeah.
We tell you guys how the sausage is made and how the stuff works.
That's right. And so today, what we're going to talk about is endings. We figured we'd end the year and end the season talking about endings. It just felt appropriate.
There's certain symmetry to that.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this, Larry, in terms of ending a short story, ending a novel, and ending a series, because I think that there are things in common with all of those, but I also think that there are differences with each of those.
Yep.
So let's talk about the first step. In your opinion, Larry, what makes for a compelling ending?
You've got to have reader satisfaction.
In what way?
There's got to be some sort of payoff. There's got to be some sort of you get to the ending and the reader's like, yeah, all right. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean you need to answer every question. Doesn't mean you need to solve every problem. But you need to have some sort of thing that happens that the reader can look at that and go, yeah, that's a conclusion. That is my reward. I have made it to the end of this book, and I am satisfied. An unsatisfying ending is when the book just ends, and they're like, "Whoa, what happened?" Now, I've had that, and I've had readers be unsatisfied at the end. Usually, when I'm setting up future events, 'cause I didn't answer everything. But the thing is, you can't answer every question, especially in an ongoing series. But we talk about ending short stories. Short stories, you have the most leeway.
Oh, yeah.
Like you don't really have to end much of anything in a short story.
No, you can almost, a lot of endings in short stories, and as a horror guy, you oftentimes your ending promotes and provokes more questions than any answers you received.
Yep.
Or you go, oh, dang, that's messed up.
Or you can flip the script at the very end on a horror thing, and that's just fine.
Yeah, and then you just stop and you walk away. It's like tossing a grenade into a room and then casually walking away.
Like on a short story, you can just, a lot of times we described this before, is it's almost like you're telling part of a story. You're telling a scene. Like you have a non-existent novel, and this is one scene of that non-existent novel. So you really don't have to answer everything or wrap that much up. You just need to wrap up that scene. You need to have something. I mean, you don't have to, they could still be on the run at the end. They could still have the disease. They could still have the world still going to explode. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But you've solved something. There's something to reward the reader they got there to the end of that. When you're ending a book, much harder, because a book you make a lot more promises as it goes.
Well, and I think that's one of the big things. When a reader picks up a book, within the first little bit of the book, there are certain expectations. And that's that you've introduced a problem, and there is some, I don't want to say that there's an obligation. I don't like that word when it comes to like author-reader, the author-reader relationship. I hate that word.
Those expectations.
There's an expectation that the author is going to do you a solid and is going to give you some semblance of closure. For example, Servants of War.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before where, at least I think we have, where we ended, we planned out the first book, and by the time I wrote like the first half of the book, we looked at it and we're like, boy, I don't know that we're going to be able to get to this end point by the time we finish it off. We'll see. But I don't think we're going to get there. So let's come up with a new ending. Yep. So I did in the draft. I turned the draft over to you. You read it over, and then you and I sit down and we have a conversation, and we're like, the ending's fine, but it's not awesome. It's not awesome enough.
It needed a little bit more.
We needed a little bit more with especially, and it had to do with the character Amos.
Yep.
We needed more closure because I believe what your exact, more or less your paraphrased exact words were, I feel like if we don't do this, there's not enough payoff for the Amos character for the readers.
Yeah. So we had 4 point of view characters, and we had brought 3 of them together, and we had a 4th one that was distant still.
Yeah.
And we set up to how we were going to get to him, but we didn't. And so I was like, with the expectations of the reader, we need to bring all 4 together. We have to have that.
Yep.
To bring the book to a satisfying conclusion.
Well, and not just that, not just for the satisfying conclusion, but in terms of the first book in a series, in a potential series,
Yep.
It was, we need them to come together so that we have a more valid and important starting point for them in book 2.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the key interesting aspects of writing the ending to a book 1 in a series.
Yeah, so when you're writing the end of a standalone novel,
That's a different game.
yeah, you got a lot more freedom.
Yeah.
If you're writing the end of book 1 in a series, you need to have a satisfying conclusion that sets up number 2. And then that brings us to our last part, is ending the series.
Yeah.
Now, ending the series, that's the biggest one. That's the one you have to stick the landing.
You got to nail that landing. You got to nail that. Okay, speaking as a guy who's reviewed and who's read
hundreds of books.
more books than the average bear, if you don't nail your landing on the series, it taints the whole series.
It really does.
Now, I'm going to speak to, it's not a book series, it's a game series. I've spoken on this before, but I'm writing a science fiction series.
Mass Effect.
Mass Effect.
Called it.
Yep. I just played through Mass Effect 1 through 3 again.
Yep.
start to finish. They had like the Legendary Edition that has all the bells and
Did
whistles.
they put a good ending on it this time?
No.
Oh.
It's a smidge more satisfying, but it's fine. Like, I to me, Mass Effect 2 is still the best of the series.
It's a great game.
It's a fantastic game.
It has a good ending.
It has an awesome ending. The feeling of the suicide mission, and then if you pick the right people, they survive. If you screw up, it's your fault and they die. Like you feel connected. And then 3, it doesn't quite have that same feeling. You do get a little bit of the sense of, oh, the galaxy is caving in on everybody and stuff, and all the Reapers are coming and stuff. But then you get to the very, very, very end. And I found as I was listening to the end, the giant cutscene that you can't fast forward for some reason. Freaking BioWare. I found that my brain was saying, you guys didn't do this right. And it had nothing to do, the main complaint that people have about the ending is that your choices didn't really matter that much. And I'm like, it's a galaxy ending event. Like, who your girlfriend is at the end of the game is irrelevant. You know, whether you punched or gave a high five to that reporter doesn't matter. Like, that's not the problem. The problem is a lack of clarity and a lack of general. It feels like it's out of left field, to use a sporting term. Like the ending, like all of a sudden there's this like weird hologram of a kid who is supposed to represent the kid that you're seeing.
I didn't finish.
I know you glitched out in one of the very last fights.
And I rage quit.
I know, I remember. My point to all this is your ending, you have to stick the ending because it's the last thing, it's that last moment that everyone is going to remember.
It colors the perceptions of the
entire series. Mass Effect 2, in my opinion, one of the greatest action role-playing games ever made.
Oh, yeah.
Ever.
Easily, yes.
But you know how many people talk about that? Very few. Because they always talk about, oh, so you just picked one of 3 endings at the end of Mass Effect 3. And I'm like, 1, your expectations are a little junk on that. But two, like, they didn't stick the ending.
More recent Game of Thrones TV show.
Oh gosh, 7 seasons or something like that.
7 seasons, and remember for a while there, it was like the hotness, and it was everywhere. And
even people who don't like Martin were looking at that show, we're going, yo, this is pretty cool.
I can't stand George Martin, like on a personal level.
But production values on that show,
beautiful show,
dude.
Yeah,
and acting on that show,
phenomenal,
really.
And
good.
I only watched like 3 episodes grand total, you know, but it's like. It was a cultural phenomena, and I have never seen anything disappear so quickly from like the cultural popularity thing as I did that.
Oh, it went from everybody cuddling and doing like kumbayas to like getting ready to stab each other in the face.
Yep, because they didn't stick the ending.
Yep.
Well, because George Martin's lazy and didn't write an ending, so they made up their own, and it sucked. But the thing is, it's like you got to stick the ending of a series. If you leave people hanging on the end of a series and you screw it up, it taints the entire thing. And so you're not just tainting one work, you're tainting 3 books, 5 books, 7 books, 12 books. That's why, honestly, why Brandon Sanderson's so damn successful is he took Robert Jordan's big mega series that had gone on for decades
and ended it in such a way that most of the fans were like, all right, cool.
He ended it better than I think most of the long-term fans were expecting it to end.
I think you're right.
Because the last few books with Robert Jordan had gone.
Well, he was Robert Jordan was in a bad spot.
Oh, yeah, to be fair. I mean, my gosh, yeah, the guy.
Dude was dying.
And he still outworked George Martin.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
So, to be fair, yeah, but that's why one reason to launch Brandon's career was he stuck the landing.
Well, and he stuck the landing on the original Mistborn trilogy.
Oh, yeah. It was a very satisfying conclusion.
That ending was good.
Yeah, it was a very satisfying conclusion. So here's the thing, guys. You've got to have payoff. The bigger the series, the bigger the payoff. You can't just like go quietly into the night. You got to stick that landing.
I do wonder, is there a difference, Larry, in your opinion? Okay, because there are different kinds of series. There's the series like, Bosch.
Open-ending long-term.
The open-ended long-term series versus a hard magic type series, which has an end, like capital END. I do think that there is a pretty heavy distinction between those two.
Absolutely. Because with Bosch, you got 26 novels or whatever it is of each one has a crime story. Each one has a case or a couple cases, and it's the adventures of this one detective solving that case. Now, in that one, the ending is about each novel. Each individual novel in the series has to have a satisfying conclusion. It's an open-ended series, so it doesn't have a big, that I know of. I don't know. Is there? I don't know. Actually,
Not really.
I haven't read that far.
I think I read like the first 12 books.
Okay, so if there's one after this, I don't hold it against me. I haven't read it yet.
I mean, look, it goes kind of where you expect, right? Like he's a cop. And then at a certain point, he's like, F this, I'm a PI.
Yeah.
Which is where the TV series goes, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are certain specific important arcs. And you even see this in the TV show. The first season of Bosch, and my wife and I are rewatching this right now because I love that show more than anything. The first season, it's about Raynard Waits. And Waits kind of becomes obsessed with Harry a little bit and uses Harry's tragic past with his mom and the murder of his mom to kind of do his own thing. So they start introducing his mom, right? Season 2. He finds out towards the end of season 2 that he starts understanding who it is that maybe murdered his mom. And then in season 3, he starts investigating perhaps, a little bit of what had to do with his mom.
So there's 2 separate story arcs.
There's the main story arc of each of those seasons. Like the first season, it's Raynard Waits. He's a serial killer.
Yeah.
Second season, it has to do with the dirty cops and the murder of the rich movie producer.
The trunk music.
Yeah. And then, season 3 is about the bad contractors. Mm-hmm. And that's what those are about. That's like the A story. And then there's B stories. For a long time, the C story in that, it's mentioned in like 2-3 episodes, maybe, just mentioned, is the through line of his mom. And I think that that's the difference between open-ended stories.
Yeah.
Is the threads that go through are often like C-level stories that kind of go through until the book where it matters and you want to solve that.
Yep.
So it goes C, 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 B, A, and then it happens and then it ends.
I actually do that with Monster Hunter.
Yeah, you do.
And that each individual book has its problem, like the big thing that the book is about. And each book, by the end of that book, that thing is solved. Mm-hmm. That is the satisfying conclusion. However, there's the overarching story that unites all the books that builds and builds and goes up and goes down. And there's developments and recurring characters and things that are revisited and so on and so forth. And so sometimes you do get people who are like, you solved the A story, but you didn't solve the C story.
Correct.
Like, what happens next? Well, that's the whole... I'm not going to stick another 140,000 words onto the end of this book.
Well, because I think that that's probably people's hanging around you as much as I do. I think that that's probably people's biggest air quotes complaint about Bloodlines. They're like, "But you didn't answer everything." And you're like, "Well, yeah."
No kidding.
You're like, "I can't."
It's
another 150,000 words.
Well, and
to
it's not
answer
even
that
the
question.
conclusion of the overall story arc either.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry guys, you're looking at a dozen books.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I think there's like different types of endings,
Yeah.
But I think we've covered those, and we're gonna come back. I think when we come back, let's talk a little bit about like how to actually pull these off.
That's a good idea. So we'll take a really quick break, and we'll come back, and we'll get into nuts and bolts. We'll be right back.
Dr. Megan McAllister was already an unusual human. NASA astronaut, professional astronomer, polymath, when she encountered the man in the black suit that night in West Texas. What Division 1 Agent Echo didn't know when he recruited her for Alpha Line was that she was even more special. But he'd find out soon enough. Award-winning author Stephanie Osborne uses the urban legend of the beings who show up at UFO sightings and make the evidence disappear to craft her vision of the universe we don't know about. Division 1 chronicles this universe through the eyes of recruit Megan McAllister, aka Omega, and experienced partner Echo, as they handle everything from lost alien children to extraterrestrial assassination to galactic invasion and more. Alpha and Omega is available in Nook, Kindle, and trade paperback wherever fine books are sold. Pick up your copy today.
Welcome back. What you missed in that break? Larry and I always have very lively discussions at the break. For you, it's mere moments. You know, you hear about whatever awesome book we're promoting, and whatever that book is, you should totally buy it, especially if it has one of our names on it, or especially if it's one of the people advertising for us, advertising in the middle of our segments. For you, it's moments. For Larry and I, it's minutes of glory, where we talk about the random crap that we're doing or complain about people. In this one, we were talking specifically about endings and how I actually have trouble writing endings. And I think that it's an end result of how you write, whether you're an outliner versus a discovery writer. One of our very, very first episodes was about this, outlining versus discovery writing. And I think that there are inherent difficulties and benefits to writing endings with either method. But I think personally, I have issues with endings because I almost always know my beginnings. That's the spark that gets me onto a story, but I don't quite know where I'm going sometimes. And so that ending becomes very difficult for me. And I start agonizing over it when I'm right around the halfway point, which is basically where I am in my novel right now.
Whereas as an outliner, I usually have the ending in mind when I start. And so I work towards it. So actually, it's interesting that you bring up the discovery writing and the endings being a challenge, because who is the single most famous and successful discovery writer alive?
Stephen King.
What is the worst thing about, like, universally agreed upon?
It's his endings. I mean, they even make fun of it in the new It movies.
Yeah. His endings
He makes
suck.
fun of it. He makes fun of it in his cameo.
Terrible endings.
Yeah.
Like he just writes crappy endings.
With the exception, and I always say this, with the exception of 11/22/63. I think that is a really, really good ending. Yeah. And I actually think it's a very, touching, good ending. It's that I love that book.
And the TV show had Nick Searcy in it.
The TV show's good.
The TV show is really good. Actually,
Nick Searcy killed it. He's so freaking good.
Good in that. But yeah, so so when you have the most famous discovery writer alive, and he struggles at it, don't feel bad that you also struggle with that.
That's true. I guess I shouldn't feel too bad.
The guy sold 100 million books, so clearly he's doing something.
Yeah, you had a 5 at the beginning of that one.
He's also proof, regardless of saying you had to stick the ending, but he's also proof that you can be successful if you don't. But then again, just like I tell people, you're not Dan Simmons, you're not Cormac McCarthy.
You ain't Stephen King.
A lot of these guys, you can coast on names. If you screw up your ending, you don't have 150 books that you wrote before that of goodwill.
Yeah, or 3,800 TV and movie adaptations.
Yeah. So as far as sticking the ending, as an outliner, I'm working towards it. That said, the advantage you have as a discovery writer is you can come up with a better ending as you go because you surprise yourself.
Yeah, which is kind of what happens. Oddly enough, when I wrote Residue, I knew what the ending to that one was going to be really, really early on. And I knew what the ending to the series was going to be almost immediately thereafter. So I mean, that to me, that's crazy. That's weird for me.
Yeah.
And that ending, the ending for the series, in my brain, we'll see if I can execute, but in my brain, like it's a perfect bittersweet ending for that series. And I'm like, okay,
Cool.
I know where I'm going. But I'm curious, Larry, when you're outlining, because we want to talk nuts and bolts, how do you get to your endings?
Okay, so I put myself in the reader's shoes and think, what is the payoff? What is the moment of cool? And I like big action set pieces. For example, the novel Spellbound. When I finished Spellbound, the original finale was the fight on the island, on Roosevelt Island, with the robots. And it was cool. And I could have ended the book there. But I wrote it and I was like, this isn't big enough. This isn't meaty enough. This needs more crazy big finale. I need a bigger, because the first book had this amazing Zeppelin fight at the end, right?
Teleporting ninjas on a Zeppelin.
And so originally I was working towards this fight against a bunch of robots on an island, and then it gets sucked into a dimensional hole and blows it up. And that's cool and all, but I was like, wait a minute, this is not enough. So I needed to get a bigger, meatier thing, hence the giant kaiju rampage through Washington, D.C. And I tell you, the endings of each of those books are baller, by the way.
Yeah, they're big pieces, big set pieces.
Those are big. All three of those has a giant epic set piece ending. So my original outline wasn't big enough, so I went back and I rewrote it to have a bigger, more satisfying conclusion. Made the whole book about 20,000 words longer.
It's about 150, right?
It's about 150. All three of those are about 150.
That sounds right.
But the payoff and the reader satisfaction. So nobody finishes that trilogy and comes away let down.
Like, dang, Larry, how come there weren't enough action scenes in this book?
Yeah,
no one says that.
Then the third one, I do the whole crazy Butch Cassidy Sundance Kid through Shanghai, but I also do a triple battle, because it's
in power armor.
Yeah, so I'm having this bizarre power armor battle through Shanghai. At the same time, I'm basically having Faye fight the giant space monster. And so it's this crazy jumping back and forth mega finale. No one leaves that series unsatisfied. You know what I mean? So I think a big part of it is you just got to get that awesome, cool payoff. You gotta get in the reader's head and say, what am I going to give these people that's going to boom, this is it. It's almost like Marvel has kind of sucked since Endgame, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Endgame had a giant payoff that they worked towards for a decade.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see Thor's hammer lift, and all of a sudden it's freaking Captain America with it.
Yeah.
There's not a single person in the freaking world that didn't go, oh, heck
Woo,
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
It was amazing. So, the movie had a lot of shortcomings and plot holes, and the whole time travel stuff was goofy as hell, but massive
is a moron.
Payoff. Oh, yeah. Thanos' plot was just dumb as crap. The movie, the comic book version was so much smarter. But the payoff was a decade of commitment to movies, and it all came together, massive payoff. Since then, though, it's just kind of and there's no direction. There's no direction. There's no big conclusion. People need that satisfying hook. And so we talk about the overarching series end versus the book end. The Marvel's Phase 4 is a great example of the series has lost its way. Each of those movies might have a satisfying conclusion. I don't know. I've only watched a few of them. I mean, Spider-Man was good. But most of them, so that movie itself has a satisfying conclusion, but it doesn't matter. Because the C plot, the big plot, the overarching plot got resolved and hasn't been replaced.
No.
Satisfactorily. So you have two separate things there, but you got to think, what does the reader want to get out of this? And am I going to give it to them? And then give it to them extra hard.
Oh, so many jokes.
I know.
So little time.
Well, I watched Die Hard again last night because I love Die Hard. To me, I think Die Hard is a perfect movie. It really, truly is a great classic movie. And it is a masterclass in building tension. But think about it. Every subplot in Die Hard has a satisfying conclusion. It leads up to a big action set piece ending where everything culminates. And then every question that needs to be answered is answered.
When I think about it that way, I'm just going to go back to the TV series of Justified.
Oh, wonderful show.
so often TV series have, let's just call them poor endings. Whether it's because they get canceled before they can, tie everything off, or, or they just don't even know if they're going to get canceled. So they wrap it up too early and then they get another season and then it just feels tacked on,
feels
or
weird,
whatever.
Yeah.
Justified actually has one of my favorite endings. Throughout the whole thing, you see Raylan as the gunfighter. You see it the whole time. You see his relationship with Boyd Crowder, and you see Boyd Crowder's relationship with everybody else. And you're always wondering, how is all this going to get resolved? And in the end, the idea is, well, what do we want to give the watcher? What do we want to give the quote unquote reader, watcher of it? And that's, well, it started with a gunfight. Maybe it should end with a gunfight. And so Raylan does. He ends up in the literal white hat, black hat gunfight at the end. And, him and then the other guy, they draw, they shoot.
Boone.
Him and Boone.
Yep.
And then it cuts to black. And you're like, oh, crap. And as the watcher, you think, well, okay, if Raylan lives, I'm happy with that because I love Raylan. But if he dies, I mean,
it makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yep.
And so somehow, and bless the writer, I'll have to ask Tony Daniel about this because one of his students was one of the writers for Justified. I'll have to ask him if he knows. But, or maybe you will. Maybe you should ask him because you know him better than I do, and you have that relationship with your Second Amendment book coming out next month.
Oh yeah.
Actually, by the time this airs, within 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
24th of January.
24th. Okay, so within 3 or 4 weeks of this episode releasing, your Second Amendment book will come out.
You guys should all buy that.
Definitely should buy that. So it comes back, the scene comes back, and Raylan gets up. He's got blood on his head, and there's a hole in his hat, and Boone's dead, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they killed Raylan's hat.
Yep, that was almost as good.
This is this was everything for me. It actually fulfilled both.
Well, another part of that scene,
but his hat, he is freaking. I mean, it's a character.
It's his emblem.
It's a character. It's himself in the show. It dies.
Ava drives away. Ava's a prisoner. Ava gets in the car and drives away.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome too. And then the very final scene of the show was him meeting with Boyd Crowder in prison.
Yeah.
Look at that, because it answered all the questions.
All the questions.
Needed to answer. It fulfilled all the promises.
And yet those lives are still going to go on and other things can happen. And in fact, we know now that we're going to see more Raylan this year.
Yeah.
When that Detroit show.
Yeah, City Primeval.
Yeah, I think it's coming Q1 or by April.
I have no idea. Fingers crossed. Hope it's good.
Me too. Oh.
Yeah. I don't know. I have little faith in Hollywood now, so.
Me too.
We'll see.
But I'll give Raylan Givens a pass.
Oh, yeah. Fingers crossed. I'll watch it.
So there's... Okay, let's get back to some nuts and bolts stuff. And I want to talk about let's start how we started the episode. Short story, novel, series. Short stories, nuts and bolts. How do we come up with endings for the short stories that we write?
Usually because I'm just trying to end one scene.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I've had short stories that have been completely self-contained.
Do you feel that the longer the quote unquote, the longer the short story goes, the more resolution you end up getting?
Yes.
I do too.
The difference between a 3,000, 5,000, 7,000, and 10,000 word story is huge.
Oh, yeah.
20,000 word novella.
That's different. That's a contained story.
Yeah, it's contained. Usually, okay, so I did, for example, a short story called The Dregs, and I did it for a fantasy anthology for Chris Kennedy Publishing. And actually, because it's not been in one of my collections yet, it's actually excellent. And I want to say it's about a 10,000 word story. Oh. And it's got a whole complete story with a ton of backstory in it too. And a big satisfying conclusion. I did another one called Mr. Sunshine, or Mr. Positive, the Eternal Optimist.
Yeah, that's in the
Laurel K.
Hamilton's one.
One of the greatest short stories I ever wrote. It's a comedy. It's imagine Chris Traeger from Parks and Rec as the Terminator. Okay, and so he's like this super upbeat assassin from the future.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I got so much world building in this. And the thing is, it has a complete story. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. It's got a conclusion for multiple characters. And it's only about 7,000 words. So it's one of those you really can. But I've had other stories that are basically, honestly, just one scene. And what's wrapped up at the end is negligible.
Yeah.
You know, like they got out of this one crisis. And that's it. So honestly, short story, man, sky is the limit. It could go anywhere from contained, complete narrative to just tiny little tidbit.
When I've been fortunate in that a lot of the Baen anthologies that I've been in terms of, especially lately, they're all longer stories, 10,000 words or so, which I guess technically isn't a short story anymore, but whatever, I don't care.
I can't ever keep
Doesn't
up on
even
those
matter anymore.
arbitrary numbers.
That some organization decided up.
Who knows? They're
screw
going to
those guys.
communist China anyway.
Yeah. Hopefully they can come back. We can always trade them for an arms dealer.
I would trade him for an arms dealer in a heartbeat.
Man. I've been fortunate in that those stories have been longer. So the Privileges of Violence, or Privileges or Profession, one of the two, I don't remember, for in Noir Fatale, that story is 10,000 words, and that's Christoph's origin story. That's a full-on story.
Oh, yeah.
That's full-on. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And it tidily wraps up with a question of, oh, well, I guess we know where he's going now.
Yep.
My story for the third volume is more of it's a single case that the character is working on.
Yep.
The challenge in that was it's a sequel to a book that I haven't written yet. So that was a little weird.
Yeah, which that's a different challenge. The beautiful thing though is you can always go back and tweak the short story to fit the universe.
Yeah,
better.
I'm not worried about that part.
Well, so I got 2 Lost Planet homicides now.
Yeah.
That I've done. So the first one's just called Lost Planet Homicide. Second one's Lost Planet Homicide, Ghosts of Zenith.
You're welcome for that title.
Good title. Thank you, Steve. We just did titles.
We just did a title episode. I forgot to bring that one up.
Yeah, we should have. Steve gave me that
We're
one.
really good at naming each other's books. Just
That was
on our
Steve's
own.
suggestion. But Ghosts of Zenith, I believe, comes out in January. And so these are novellas, about 20,000 words, exactly 20,000 words novellas.
Exactly.
And actually, I'm doing the Bosch thing on those where you have a case,
Yeah.
but then there's the overarching thing. So I have
There's the through line.
So there's a through line. So the case is a murder he's trying to solve in the first one. Second one's a hostage situation that he's trying to solve.
So good.
But there's the big question is like, what is actually going on with this lost colony? Why did this lost colony get tossed to the ass end of the universe? What is really going on? Are there aliens involved? What the heck is going on here? And so there's 2 separate stories, but the main A story is resolved in each book. But the C one, I'm going to keep going until I have 5 of these, and I'm going to make a novel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's my plan.
Yeah, just a collection that you throw them in that arc, especially if it's all in one story. That C arc that graduates to the A arc by the end will be pretty satisfying.
Yeah, because there's a lot of clues in there. And so honestly, guys, endings are multi-layered. And you just got to be strategic about this and be clever and write to your mission. So if your mission is I'm writing a 1 book, one and done, then by golly, you get that ending everything you can, maximum satisfaction. If you're doing a continuing arc, think about you give them enough to have a satisfying conclusion, but leave the threads hanging that you can pick at for the second one.
Okay, I guess that leads to a question that I have. That we can discuss. When we had Toni Weisskopf on down at FenCon, we were asking her about the approaches of new authors coming to her with stories and saying, okay, well, how should they be presenting this to you?
Yep.
Like novel series? And she's like, novels that can totally be series at some point.
Yep.
So where's that line then? How do we do that? How do we say, oh, this can be a standalone book? How do we give just enough satisfaction to say this is a standalone, but here's some questions that can be turned into a series?
The 2 books I would suggest for my own repertoire, just to kind of because I wrote Monster Hunter that way. and I wrote Hard Magic that way. Both of them were designed that they could stand by themselves, yet both of them introduced enough world stuff that I can continue the story. And I would suggest if readers haven't read, or if listeners haven't read those are ones where I've done a really good job, I think. Obviously, I'm biased, but, it's paid off. It's hooked. But like Son of the Black Sword, I knew that was going to be a series going in. From the get-go, I knew that was going to be a series.
Well, and I think we wrote... Servants of War has a very distinct ending.
Oh, it does. It has a solid ending.
And yet, there's a lot of questions unanswered.
Yeah, we had a lot of threads. And we have a bigger overarching thread who we introduced.
Yep.
And dealt with. And actually interesting, too, the opposite side of this coin is Gunrunner that I did with John Brown. So Gunrunner, unfortunately for me, had the misfortune of coming out during the height of COVID. 99% of the booksellers in America were closed, and I was trying to launch a new sci-fi series. And so it did okay compared to everything else, but everything else sucked too. And like nobody sold any books that year. It was a terrible year for books.
It was bad.
And we sold ebooks. That was it. People weren't even commuting anymore, so even audio was down. So it just wasn't. And at this stage of my career, I compete against myself.
Yeah.
Right. I'm competing against my own time. I'm not competing against other people. And so that series is probably not going to go anywhere else. It's probably going to be one and done.
Well, I mean, it's in the same Lost Planet universe.
Well, it's the same universe as Lost Planet Homicide, but I'm saying the Gunrunner story is probably done, which is too bad because it's a lot of fun. If you guys haven't read it, Gunrunner is a great story. But the thing is, Gunrunner is also a cohesive narrative that has an ending.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it sets up a bunch of other stuff that we could have continued. It has a bunch of other questions that aren't resolved, but the actual story is done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got an ending.
It has. I think it has much more of a stamped, so to speak, ending than, say, Servants of War.
Yeah, Servants, we definitely... The way Servants ended, that those characters aren't at the end of their journey.
Oh, they're not even close.
Whereas the way Gunrunner ended, one character was off, had to flee. The other character, was probably just going to keep doing his thing, And so we could walk away from the story right there and be content, The readers are content. The readers have a solid ending. And they had a big action set piece, kaiju battle at the end with giant robots. So it's one of those things. So make sure, guys, if you are trying to do this thing, like when Tony was talking to Steve during that interview about pitch it as a book that can't stand alone yet turn into a series, those are perfect examples. On one hand, Servants of War did turn into a series, whereas Gunrunner is going to be by itself. So it's one of those you don't know. When you write this stuff, you don't know what the market's going to receive it as. You don't know how it's going to go. It's one of those you don't want to put... in accounting, we have sunk costs.
Sunk cost fallacies.
Yep, sunk cost fallacy. People are like, well, I've invested this much time in this project. I must continue.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. You really don't. If I have a book that's not making much money, I could write book 2 and then try to get book 1 jump started, or I can go write book 1 of something else that's a whole new fresh slate.
Yep.
So you guys got to be very analytical on this. Like I said, that book is good, and I feel I'm proud of it. And we did stick the ending; it was a great ending. It's a good book. However, just the market conditions at the time, it is what it is. Yeah. So,
all right. I have a feeling that at some point we'll come back to this and tackle this some more. Maybe we'll come back to it as I'm wrapping up as a discovery writer. Maybe we'll do specific episodes on tackling endings as a discovery writer, tackling endings as an outliner, especially as or tackling endings as a co-authorship.
We could probably pick some books and shows that people that are really familiar with, and compare and contrast ones that did have good, solid endings.
Okay. Well, let's
and then see why.
Okay, so I'm just going to say right now, the ending of Justified,
Fantastic.
I think, is fantastic. I also think that the season 7 of Bosch, before it turns into Bosch Legacy,
which I have not watched yet. I'm waiting for my daughter to get home
so
to watch it with her.
I actually think it's a good ending, it's a little abrupt for me. But you felt it coming the whole time.
As much as I love the TV show of The Expanse,
That ending's weird, dude.
it's a weird ending.
And you know what I think it is?
Well, I think that was forced by the nature of like the deal they had on TV.
I think there's two aspects to it. So the book series does almost the same thing. Book 6 happens, and there's some events that happen. And I think you see them, there's like those, I don't know, it's like that weird sea line through season 6 on the show where they're on the different planet and there's like the weird aliens and crap.
So there's clearly some sort of alien technology behind the scenes.
And then
that's
it just
pissed off.
stops.
Yeah.
Right? Now in the books,
I'm assuming there's a time jump.
it's like 30 years or something like that. I was talking with our buddy Dan Smythe about this because he's like super fan of The Expanse. And so he and I were talking about it. He's like, oh yeah, there's a time jump and then all that stuff actually matters. But in the show, they have it in there. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so it makes the ending weird.
It's hard to do a 30-year time jump on a TV show. Well, you know, and here's one that does stick to Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad had a really interesting ending
Yeah, it
for
had
me.
an interesting ending, but did it answer every question?
Oh, heck no.
Yeah, it didn't.
No,
But
I mean, they ended up making a TV movie because Jesse drives off
El Camino.
in the El Camino.
Yep. Now, the thing is, though, was it a good ending, though? Was it a satisfying ending?
To me, it was satisfying.
I found it satisfying.
Jesse escaping as he did, Walter dying as he did,
Yep.
his wife being a shell of herself because of everything she went through.
Because she was evil.
Oh, she was a different sort of evil than him,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
but she was bad.
See, but I think that was a show with I think it had a good ending.
I think so.
Did it answer? No, it didn't. But it answered enough. It gave you the payoff. It gave the watcher the payoff, and I think that's key.
Did you watch all of Burn Notice?
Yeah, I watched the entire thing of Burn Notice. I've seen every
So
episode.
some of the episodes I felt like towards the end of the series there was a lot of filler, but the ending.
Okay, so the last season where he went back to work for the CIA got really weird. However,
But that very last episode,
Yep.
that ending where what's her name?
his mom.
No, not as well, that's a tragic ending, but a
Yeah.
good ending for her. But the ending of Fiona when she's reading to the kid,
Yeah.
and she says, "Let me tell you about a story about a guy named what's his freaking name?
Mike Weston.
Michael Weston. He used to be a spy."
Yep.
Like to tie it in with like the intro bump to every episode. I was like, "Oh dang, good
So
freaking
good.
job,
So good.
good
Yeah.
freaking job."
Yeah, it actually had. I thought it had a very satisfying conclusion.
X-Files, terrible ending.
It was so bizarre. Like that was just like wonky, bizarre.
It just stops.
And it'd be like if you write a book and having the main characters just leave and have new characters come in, which is really too bad. 'Cause I'm a fan of Robert Patrick. I think Robert
Yeah.
Patrick's a fantastic actor.
Oh yeah.
And so I think Robert Patrick kind of got screwed,
He did.
in this job. No one could have saved this.
No, it didn't matter. This is not an indictment of him. It didn't matter.
No, Robert Patrick is fantastic.
Mads Mikkelsen could have come in, and it wouldn't have been good.
It could have been Idris Elba and
Timothy Oliphant,
Timothy Oliphant.
dude,
and
and it still would have sucked.
And it still would have sucked.
It's too bad. So
What
like,
is funny? Like we immediately knew the exact same
yeah.
actors.
Yeah, this is how you know, guys. This is how you know that Larry and I have been friends for a long time. All right, so those are some good examples for you in terms of books. I do want to recommend in terms of I'm going to shill Larry for a sec, both in terms of Hard Magic with a contained series, and then the kind of the ongoing series with a more long-term open-endedness to it, Monster Hunter. I think both of those are really, really good examples of what we're talking about. Another series that I think is actually really, really cool and good about this is called the Milkweed Triptych. It's from a guy named Ian Tregillis. The first book is called Bitter Seeds. The next one is called The Coldest War. And then the third one is called Necessary Evil. Those 3 books are awesome. And they're actually, I don't know if you know this, Larry, they're the seed for where I got our Octoon Cthulhu campaign from.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
The idea is World War II. Germany has all of these like weird human hybrid monster things, like people with powers. And then the British use basically Cthulhu gods to fight them. Series is awesome, and the ending is really cool and distinct, which is why I recommend it to a lot of people. It's kind of off the wall. Each book has a pretty interesting ending, especially book 2, and it could have been done. It could have been over at the end of book 2, but then book 3 comes out and it puts a whole new spin on it. It's really, really cool.
Cool.
So anyway, those are some of your literature ones. If you want a horror, I know there's a lot of people. I get a lot of requests for good horror recommendations now. Oddly weird, right?
Drink.
It's like I'm a horror author. Speaks the Nightbird by Robert McCammon. It's the start of like a 9-book series, but it feels like it could have ended after book 1, and it's completely satisfying that way. Awesome. So there you have it. Endings, the end of the show, the end of the season, the end of the year. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Writer Dojo. We'll see you in season 4. We'll see you next year, dad joke.
See you guys.
Adios.
Writer Dojo is Steve Diamond and Larry Correia. Produced by Jack Wilder and Bear and Hare Studios. Theme song, Word Mercenaries by Craig Nybo. New episodes come out every Wednesday wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/WriterDojo, by leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on the Writer Dojo, email ads@writerdojo.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to questions@writerdojo.com.
We need aliens.